is top 10 point guards. That's exactly what I want to get into here today. And I think, it's fun to start at the point guard position because there's so many good to great point guards in the NBA these days. But let's start from the bottom, Zach, and we'll go from there and kind of figure out how we want to go about this. But I'm going to start at number 10, and I actually have Tyrese Halliburton at number 10 myself here. Coming off a pretty good season last year for the Indiana Pacers, kind of stapled himself as the face of that franchise, gets the max extension this offseason. So this guy is primed to take the next step, right? He became an all-star last year, but maybe he can excel into that superstar-esque status next year, depending what else they're able to put around him in Indiana. But average over 20 points per game last year, 49% from the field, 40% from the three-point line. I believe he was second in the league in assists behind Harden at the 10.4 assists per game mark. And he also averaged 1.6 steals per game. Tyrese Halliburton comes in at my number 10 point guard in the NBA as of right now. I mentioned how I love his game. It's free-flowing. We started to see towards the end of his run with Sacramento the ability to shoot the ball, and that's translated heavily over into the Indiana Pacers organization where he's kind of been let loose. So I actually really love his game and where he could take his game. Another conversation for another day. Should the Sixers have traded for Tyrese Halliburton instead of James Harden at the time? I know there was talks. I don't know if it was actually even a real thing, but that's something I go back on in my mind quite often just because of how young Tyrese Halliburton is compared to Harden. But you'll see Harden's actually a little bit up further on this list. So I think as of right now, they've made the right decision at least. Number 10 for you. What do you got for me? Or thoughts on Halliburton if he's not in your top 10?
Yep. So first of all, I just want to make this clear. This is right now how these players are playing this past year at the moment. We're not projecting anything, right? That's exactly how I did this.
Correct.
All right. So there's no projections involved here. My list would look way different. By the way, it's just who they are. So it's facts based, and that's why it makes it a lot easier and more fun to talk about, in my opinion. But to be honest, Halliburton's become a little overrated in my eyes because he's still last year he only played 56 games. That's a big number for me. That matters. Don't think All-Star I was okay with it, but I thought like Harden definitely should have been an All-Star over him. It was BS there. And so the team won 35 games last year. He's not a proven winner, and that's the most important for the point guard spot. I got Halliburton at 13.
Okay.
And so he's in my tier 4 of point guards, which is crazy. I did a list of 21. I got 5 tiers. My tier 4, I'll tell you, at 12, I got Jrue Holiday. 14, I got DeJounte Murray. 15, Darius Garland. And 16, LaMelo. Those guys are all in the same tier. You could have them any order, in my opinion.
I can get down with that. Yeah, I actually
like that tier.
I can get down with that. Yeah, I actually like that tier all grouped together.
Okay, let me ask you this: do you have Halliburton above Jrue Holiday?
I do.
Okay, I got Jrue ahead solely based. Defense, leadership. Winning games, and he's proven in big moments yet.
Fair.
I expect Halliburton to pass him this year. But
we're not going off projections. Fair enough.
You got it. So my number 11, I got Jalen Brunson. I just want to mention this. Do you have him higher than 11?
I do not. I do not have him higher than Halliburton.
So why Halliburton over Jalen Brunson? Because I don't think it's even a debate right now.
For me, I think it's more or less a preference of play. The way Halliburton plays versus Jalen Brunson. I look at Jalen Brunson. It's hard. I'm trying not to hate on him because he is such a dog. And there's times when I look at Jalen Brunson and I wonder if he's like playing. This is going to sound so disrespectful. I'm wondering if he's like playing outside of his talent level sometimes. Like, because he works so hard, because he has such good intangibles.
Yes, he is, of course, but that's the goal. That's the goal. You got to give him his flowers while they're there. Like, we can demote him when he stops pretending like you guys want to believe. I get it, but like these are the facts. This is what's
That's
actually
fair.
happening. The dude's got this guy beat in every single category besides passing and playmaking, really. But like you put him in a different situation, maybe he's a much better passer, playmaker, and I think he's just as intelligent. But I don't think he necessarily just makes those plays because the Knicks have needed him, and it translates to wins.
That's fair. That's fair. And he has helped the Knicks succeed and get to the playoffs, get to the second round of the playoffs, and even, played really tough against the Miami Heat, who went on to go to the NBA championship. So I get your point. I think for me, it's just more of a preference at that point. Like, I do get your point. I think the top level talent, but then you're talking about projections. So to be fair, I feel you. I do feel you. I feel you questioning the Halliburton. Maybe I'm just being biased. Maybe I like Halliburton a little too much, man.
I understand.
To be fair, Brunson is number 12 on my list ultimately, so he is behind Halliburton by 2 spots. But
no, that's
you
fair
got me
because aesthetics. I mean, Halliburton might be a way prettier player, and I can understand that. But I'm a mentality guy. I'm the dog, and but like. Even from when you look at it from like a player ranking standpoint and the rankings they put out, Brunson came in at 25, Halliburton at 26. So everybody thinks they're extremely close.
And I actually did write down not your top 10, but the top 10 point guards from your top 100 list from Twitter, obviously voted on by the Twitter followers of you. Actually, Kyrie comes in at number 10, it looks like. Number 10 of point guards.
Okay. So for instance, I'll get to my number 10 here.
I love that. Still need your number 10.
So, but like I'm higher on Drew than most, it seems. Like I have him, like I said, above Halliburton, and the player rankings, he was 33 versus Halliburton was 26. And so anyways, my number 10 is Ja.
Ja, okay.
And I mean, that's talent-wise, he could probably be a tad higher, but it's crazy. That's the one that really blew my mind. And I know I'm lower on than most, but I just think he's not a great playoff performer. And we've seen it enough so far. Like, until he proves me wrong in the playoffs, like, I could have even, like, for instance, I have him in tier 3 with a group of guys. I'll tell you who's in that tier. So Brunson's in that tier. Kyrie, De'Aaron Fox, Trae Young, and then Jamal Murray are all in that tier 3 player. But with that said, and I mentioned them out of order, so no hints there. But Ja, I mean, defensively, like the individual talents there. Okay, it's just the team's really good without him too. I mean that says something to me, and I need to see more as a leader, as a playmaker, a passer, and doing it in key situations. Yes, he's had moments, but not enough of them for me.
Did you? I just wanted to, and you don't have to answer. I'll just wait on your list. Actually, I was going to ask about De'Aaron Fox, but we'll just wait as we go up the list. I actually have Ja at number 9 personally myself. Okay. So I kind of feel similar to the way you feel about him. Like, he's got all the talent and skill, athleticism in the world. He doesn't have his mind on straight, obviously, right? The off the court stuff, and it reoccurring. That's the biggest issue there, is when things happen again after you make the first mistake, then you make the same mistake. That's usually a character flaw there. But on top of that, like you said, in the playoffs, whether it's him getting injured in the playoffs or it's him not being as effective as he is in the regular season in the playoffs. And to me, it seems like the lack of consistent shooting ability is ultimately costing him in the postseason, because when you can't shoot the ball regularly from the outside or comfortably from the outside, you have to drive into the lane. You have to put your body at risk. You have to sky through the air, right? Like, he does a lot of that. Falls down on his wrists. He's had a couple hand and wrist problems just from falling. So just that kind of reckless play is a little scary when it comes to Ja Morant because that's really what we know him as, right? Like that's
Right.
his game. So like it's almost like he can't even change from that or that he won't be Ja Morant. He has to improve his 3-point shot. His shooting overall, I think, is going to help him. But just in general, just the intangibles, the leadership, getting his mind straight, focusing on basketball. And I think he can be up this list quite further based on a talent level. But from just, the facts, as you mentioned, not going off of projections here or his potential, this is where he comes out for me at number 9, man. And yeah, I guess I would ask the question, like, at this point, and maybe this isn't a discussion the year before. I can't remember what the narratives were around Trae Young going into last season because I feel like people were really high on the Hawks getting DeJounte Murray, pairing him with Trae Young. Ja Morant or Trae Young at this point in their careers, right? Like, who are you taking as your point guard? And maybe it'll answer as we go up the rankings. I know it will for me, but
Oh, it will. It's Trae Young. It's Trae Young for
yeah,
me for sure. But I mean, if you take Ja, I don't hate that because of just talent wise,
he fills the
athleticism.
stat
I
sheet.
mean,
Like, he does fill the
you're right.
stat sheet. Like,
He does.
it's weird. Yeah.
And here's the thing: Ja's passes are very equal to Trae's passes, in my opinion. I think Trae's pass. I've always said this. I think Trae's passing is very overrated. Um, and so that part, I'm not going to sit there and hammer home on that statistic. It's the shooting. It's the
Yeah.
showing up in the big moments, the playoff moments, and
Because
I just
what
think
was
the
that
overall
playing
game,
game?
I prefer Trae Young.
The playing game with the Hawks where Trae Young just takes over that, or maybe it was actually against the Celtics where he actually won a game or two just by simply going off against the Celtics, and
Yep.
that's what separates me with Trae Young versus Ja's, that ability, and I think that's kind of what you just hinted towards. But who's your number 9?
So here's the thing: my number 9 is Kyrie Irving,
Okay,
but uh, it's going to be weird. Kyrie's not going to be a point guard going forward, so I have him and Luke on here. I hope you did too.
yeah,
Okay, so
yeah,
and that's because Kyrie's been. So it sucks. Obviously, you can always move everybody up one here, so that would make Brunson my number 10, and Kyrie just falls off the list.
yeah.
But because Kyrie's been, he hasn't been the point guard since Boston, essentially. And yeah, he'll play more point
So
guard when
true.
Luke is out here. But yeah, he's been a shooting guard in Brooklyn. He's been a shooting guard now in Dallas. So going forward, Kyrie won't be on the point guard list, which is interesting. But yeah, I think this is a perfect spot for Kyrie based on talent, what he's done performance wise. You could have him even lower, in my opinion,
Yeah.
if you wanted to put Kyrie below Halliburton or Drew. Not Drew. I mean,
I did.
Brunson.
To be clear and transparent, I do have Kyrie below those guys. So Kyrie is
Okay.
not
I
in my
love it.
top 10.
Love it.
And I'll go ahead and throw it out there for you. Like for me, it's just like the toxicity that comes with Kyrie, and maybe that's not fair
Yeah.
to him. Along with him just not running the show, right? Like he's not this ultra facilitator that's going to run the offense. He's going to score the rock, and that's kind of my thought process. Although I did categorize him as a point guard, I just didn't hold his point guard characteristics over other point guards, if that makes sense.
Dude, listen to this. So he hasn't played more than 70 games, which is missing 12 games since 2017. That's literally 6 years ago.
That's insane.
And 67. So he went 60 games, 67, 20 games, 54, 29. Yep, 29, 60. And then the last year, 60 again. Like the dude's always 100% certain to miss 20
Yeah,
games.
like legitimately,
Like
legitimately, man.
that,
He
yeah,
still
it
puts
doesn't
up
really even
numbers
deserve.
though.
So I'm giving him more benefit of the doubt at number 9. But number 8 here, I got De'Aaron Fox.
Okay. Okay, yeah. So that's actually exactly where I have De'Aaron Fox as well. So we can just talk about him, right? Because
Love it.
he's actually my number 8 as well. And just to solidify that Kyrie Irving point, yeah, Kyrie is so interesting because his talent level how can you say he's not top 10, right? Like the things that he can do with the basketball, like it's hard to say that he's not top 10, but I agree with everything you said. De'Aaron Fox, this was interesting for me, and this got tight between him and Trae Young. Precursor Trae Young is going to be number 7 on my list.
Me and you both.
Oh, well, we're on the same page then. So I guess I'll throw it to you. Why do you have Trae Young over De'Aaron Fox?
So I will say I do give a little benefit of the doubt to past history too,
Yeah,
for what you've done up until this point, not just last season. So
fair.
that's a little the edge to Trae Young. But also, I just think the pieces and the coach in Sacramento were stable from the beginning of the year. They
Makes a
fit
huge
De'Aaron Fox perfectly. He's had time to grow with this team. So, I mean, environment really matters here. Environment really is kind of what got De'Aaron Fox to number 8 as well. But that's also why you can say he had more success last year, where Trae Young did a lot with a lot of moving parts, and
Yeah.
just there was a lot of injuries in Atlanta that people still didn't like to talk about last year. And
The
the
coach
difference
got
is
fired
like,
mid-season too, right?
yeah, yeah,
Bring in
absolutely.
Quinn Snyder, so should have a
Uh,
better
I
future at
think
least.
I think right this year. I think Trae Young's going to blow De'Aaron Fox out of the water.
Yeah,
I think it's give me his second year with Quinn Snyder. Like I fully believe like Trae Young could go way up this list.
yeah,
I think he has
yeah,
that type of talent. Um, with that said, though, Trae Young like stat line is like all time comparisons like that. Those are the type like top 30 type player. It's just getting it done in the playoffs and making
yeah,
others better around him. Where De'Aaron Fox hasn't got to that level yet. Where if you do his Darko and you look at his career progression, like he's on the same trajectory of like Mike Conley, Darius Garland, and Kyle Lowry. Like those 4 point guards, you look at their wavelengths and
yeah.
Darko, it's like pretty identical. So it's just another level of player for sure.
Yeah, no, I agree with everything you said there. The thing with De'Aaron Fox, he superiorly impressed in the postseason this year, right? He showed up big against the Golden State Warriors, forced them to 7. But to your point, they got a nice, stable system there in Sacramento, and they got the right pieces around him, right? And the veteran head coaching experience from Mike Brown. And then you get to Atlanta, which is this dysfunctional mess last year, to the point where they traded for DeJounte Murray in the offseason, and then there was rumors that they're going to trade him right afterwards. So, like, that's how much dysfunction is going on in Atlanta. And you bring in Quinn Snyder, and I agree, just get some type of formality going there, some stabilism going with that organization. And we'll get to see what Trey's really about. I unfortunately had to watch Trae Young dismantle the Sixers in the second round of the postseason, where I had superior confidence that the Sixers were going to at least the Eastern Conference Finals that season. And I watched this man tear apart my team, and it's not just the shooting. It's not just the passing, which I do agree with you, the overrating of the passer, right? He does a lot of the same thing over and over, if that makes sense. Like, it's not that he's doing Harden-esque type of playmaking out there
Yeah.
where he's finding guys and making guys open, right? But he does
Trae
get
Young
the ball
doesn't
around.
necessarily make guys better yet.
He racks up the assists. Like, he does get the numbers at least, right? And that's something you
Usage.
have to look
Yeah.
at with Trae Young. But it's just the fluidity and the fear of the shot making ability, right? When he crosses half court, he can cash that out from there, right? And that holds the defense accountable. It makes the way you play the Atlanta Hawks completely different. And to that point, I think that Trey has a bigger impact on the game when it comes to how do you play Trae Young, right? Whereas De'Aaron Fox, he started to show the three-point shooting ability a little bit more last year, started playmaking a little bit more, probably a better defender for sure, but still just doesn't have that overall impact that I feel that a Trey level-esque player brings to a team. So all due respect to De'Aaron Fox, I thought he played amazing last year. I thought he had an outbreak season to a T. But you look at their numbers, that's De'Aaron Fox's outbreak season, what? 25 points per game, 4 rebounds per game, 6 assists per game. Meanwhile, Trae Young is having a year where he comes out of the season probably underrated, and he averaged 26 points per game and 10 assists per game, second in the NBA in assists. So that kind of shows you the difference in levels of players there, although I would put them in the same tier, right? When you look at the top 10 from your top 100 on Twitter, just wanted to point out Kyrie Irving came in at 10. Trae Young came in at 9 on that list from votes from Twitter. And then Ja Morant comes in at number 8. And then there's De'Aaron Fox at number 7 above Ja Morant. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I'm with
Am
you.
I right?
Yeah, for point guards alone.
Point guards alone. So Kyrie at 10, Trae Young at 9, Ja Morant at 8, De'Aaron Fox at 7. And that's according to the Twitter poll rankings. So far for me, it is Halliburton 10, Ja 9, De'Aaron Fox 8, Trae Young 7. And for you, it is Brunson 10. Am I right? Or Brunson's 11 for you.
So Brunson's 11, Ja 10, Kyrie 9, and Fox at 8. Trae Young's at 7.
All right.
And if you take Kyrie out, Brunson goes to 10.
Brunson goes to 10. Gotcha. So we're on number 6 then
6
right now.
One last thing I want to say with Trae is Timothy Bontemps today came out and said that he would take easily. He's always been just a big Trae Young hater, but people value his opinion at times. And so he'd go, obviously Steph, but he goes Brunson, Tyrese Halliburton, Drew Holiday, and probably a few others.
I would be interested to know who the few others would be.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, that's wildly disrespectful, honestly. I'm not that I'm saying like you don't take Brunson. Like you can argue Brunson from like a leadership and tangible standpoint, you take over Trae Young, but Tyrese Halliburton, right now, there's no argument for that. I mean, you kind of dismantled my Tyrese Halliburton at 10 versus Jalen Brunson. You know what I mean? So like, I don't understand why the disrespect is being thrown Trae Young's way, man. It's kind of odd.
And people that want to throw shade on Trae Young's playoff performance this year, he was pretty equal to De'Aaron Fox. If you look at the overall big picture, I mean, it's definitely Fox had a better series, but I thought Boston's harder than Golden State, especially in the first round. And Trae Young got 2 wins off them.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, if it comes down to it, I'd say like De'Aaron Fox had 6 good games, like 5 great games and 1 bad game, where Trae Young had
4,
1 really bad game, 1 kind of bad game, and then 4 really good ones.
Yeah.
Essentially. So, but again, Fox had more of the chemistry and all of that. But
because that game 3 through game 6 stretch for Trae Young is actually kind of insane. I mean, game 6, he went 9 for 28, so not great shooting, but 30 points in game 6, 38 in game 5, 35 in game 4, 32 in game 3. So, I mean, he letting it all out on the table against the Boston Celtics, who I agree, I think they would be a tougher task than the Golden State Warriors of last season. So, it's interesting, man. Trae Young hate. Well, maybe that's a conversation for another day we can get into when we talk about the Atlanta Hawks. But number 6 for me, man, and this is where it gets a little sketchy for me. I won't lie to you, but I have Jamal Murray here, the NBA champion. And Jamal Murray coming off last season. I have his postseason numbers because that's where this man made his mark. That finals run was ridiculous from the Denver Nuggets. But I did have to I don't want to disrespect him. I feel like when you get into these conversations, you have to bring up negatives, and it's almost like you're putting them down. This man averaged 26 points, 47% from the field, 39% from the three-point line, 5.7 rebounds per game, 7 assists per game, 1.5 steals per game in the playoffs, aside of Nikola Jokic. Now, just to be clear about why I have Jamal Murray not over some of these other guys ahead of him. He plays with Nikola Jokic at this point, and that is the best player in the goddamn world right now, especially when it comes to making guys around him better. So I had to take a little bit of credit away from Jamal Murray, which, to be fair, he's coming in at number 6. It's not very bad when you look at the talent pool here. But yeah, that's the reasoning why I have him where he is. Playoff success, the playoff outburst last season, and we've seen it in the past as well. This isn't the first time he's broke out in the playoffs, but the first time since his injury. And then the other side of that is he plays with Nikola Jokic, which is also why he's not in the top 5.
The Jokic tax. The Jokic tax is real. It's real. But no, Jokic is part of the reason why he was.
What happened here? Think we might have lost Zach for a second there. Let's see. See if we can refresh. His laptop died. No worries. He will be back very shortly here. Yeah, Jamal Murray. It's an interesting conversation just to keep the dialogue going here. He just left the studio, so he should be back shortly. Jamal Murray. It's funny. Zach uses the term Jokic tax, and I think that's got to be included in this conversation when you're talking about Jamal Murray. Obviously had an incredible finals run with the Denver Nuggets, and big reason why they were able to ultimately win the NBA championship. I just wanted to go through some of these finals games from Jamal Murray as we take a look here. So against the Miami Heat, the game 3 is the big one, right? Where he takes over the fourth quarter, ends up with 34 points, 10 assists, 10 rebounds, grabs a triple-double, takes a page out of the Jokic book. And I think that's a big point here is that he can also fill the stat sheet. It's not just scoring off of Jokic. He can do things on his own. He can play make on his own. And a big part of that pick and roll that he runs with Jokic that is seamless, that basically no one can stop when it comes down to it. That is a big part of that is Jamal Murray and his shot making ability. And he's one of the best shot makers in the NBA. I wanted to go back to the Lakers series because that's the one where he truly, truly dominated and pushed this team forward. You obviously had Nikola Jokic in that series against the Lakers. He's going against AD, so there's a lot of responsibility that comes with playing against AD and taking on that task, taking on that matchup. So when you look at it from that perspective, the way Jamal Murray stepped up in that series against the Lakers, averaged 32.5 points, shot 40% from 3, 53% from the field, had averaged over 6 rebounds, over 5 assists per game. So just speaks to what Jamal Murray can do in the playoffs. Hey, we maintained while you were gone, my man.
Boy.
Just going over a little bit of what a little bit further detail of what Jamal Murray was able to do in the playoffs last year. But I'll toss it to you. I know you were about to discuss Jamal Murray and how fitting beside Jokic, how that works.
Yeah, always embarrassing when that happens, but whatever. With that said, Jamal Murray actually cooled off in the finals, and that's something of note. But they still won in 5 games, so who really gives a shit, really?
Right.
But yeah, I mean, he only had one great game in the finals.
Yeah, game 3.
Yeah, and one decent game in game 1. So
it was really the Western Conference Finals where he made his mark there.
Yeah, and regular season matters. I mean, he's good. He hasn't been fantastic or great, but I mean, he's the perfect complement to Jokic. So you got to think about with Jamal Murray. What is he like in other situations? I think he's a great player, but I don't think he's better than any of these guys above him yet. And some of these lower ones,
they're arguable.
Yeah, absolutely. So Jamal Murray might be high here. I mean, he definitely benefited in the player rankings. He was number 13 overall, which is pretty insane in my opinion.
Yeah,
I personally have him a bit lower than that, but with that said, I mean, giving dudes their credit, and playoffs is way
yeah,
more important. You got to factor that in. I think 6 is a fine spot for him now, but do I expect him to keep this? Maybe we'll see. Because who knows?
that's fair.
I think there's a world where Jokic's numbers go backwards here, and Jamal Murray's and Michael Porter Jr.'s spike up a bit, and
Yeah.
some of these younger players, as it should. Denver needs it because that's a lot of tread on Nikola Jokic, and how much better can that guy get?
Yeah,
Let's
exactly.
really think about it. Like the other guys have room to get a lot better.
Yeah,
So
they do.
uh, it's a good spot for him, but there's no debate for him any higher, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Do you think he can get any higher? Because I think he's the last in my tier 3 of that group of guys I mentioned: Murray, Trae Young, De'Aaron Fox, Kyrie, Ja, Brunson. I think those guys are all in the same tier.
So Murray is interesting. So he could go up just by nature, maybe one spot, based on my rankings right now. The other four guys in my top five are gonna be there. Like I don't know when they're gonna drop out of there. Maybe in 3 years, possibly. But for the most part, those other guys, I don't think they're gonna be movable. It was interesting the dialogue after the finals. There were people calling him the best point guard in the NBA, and I think that's a
Crackheads.
little bit of hype there. But when you look at the guys below him, do I think he can maintain his spot over De'Aaron Fox? Yeah, I do. I think he can. Ja Morant's an interesting one. I think if Ja can get his head right, he's one of those guys that could jump ahead of Jamal Murray, possibly. The big clutch moments. That's the thing when you're mentioning Jamal Murray. It's like you got to think back to some of the moments in the playoffs that he's had versus some of these other guys. But I don't know. Halliburton, do I think, like, am I bold enough to say that he will be better than Jamal Murray? I don't know. I really like his game. Jalen Brunson, same thing.
I don't
I
see a
could see
world
him
where,
moving. I could see him moving into the top five. He would be.
yeah,
He's in that tier with Fox, Brunson, so on and so forth. Those are all guys that, if they take the necessary step,
right.
Trae Young, they can move into that top five. Trae Young, like, what does Trae Young do next to Nikola Jokic?
I think very similar to what he does now, honestly.
Yeah,
I think his game looks a lot different next to Jokic. That's for sure. I think it looks closer to Jamal Murray
yeah,
than it. I think he can move without the ball,
yeah,
like Murray can. But personally, like Trae Young's one guy. I feel like obviously they're only one spot apart for us, but I think he's one guy that could leap Jamal Murray. I don't see a world where
yeah,
Fox, like, if you put Jamal Murray this year in Fox's situation, he's almost probably averaging close to 30 in my opinion.
yeah,
Uh, I think he's that dude. I think
yeah.
he's averaging more than 25 that Fox had. And then same with like Ja Morant. Like you put him in that
In
offense
Memphis,
in Memphis, man.
that's
Come
fair.
on. Come on. He fits perfectly
Yeah,
with those guys. I mean, they all fit seamlessly. Like Ja's the odd man out in that group. He's just a great talent. Um,
that's fair.
that ball
Yeah,
movement's excellent. Jalen Brunson, even like I think his numbers go up in New York a lot. So
yeah.
like Brunson, Halliburton, those guys, yeah, like it's close.
It's
It's
close.
close in that group.
It's
So
close.
any last thoughts on Jamal Murray before number 5?
No, no, I think that's a good way to wrap it up. I think he's in the right spot. And when we list our top five here, I think we'll understand why he's in the spot he's in. Just to go back to our point of reference, though, coming in at number 7, we had De'Aaron Fox of the top 100 on Twitter voted. Number 6 was actually James Harden, which I wanted to bring this up because James Harden actually comes in at number 5 on my top 10 list here. You don't like that one. James Harden comes in at number 5 for me. The four guys ahead of him, I just their output is just monumental. But I don't know, from a point guard standpoint, there's an argument there that Harden is the best point guard in the NBA. Like, there's an
Right.
argument for that. Like, I want to make that clear. But from a production standpoint, I had to put the other 4 guys ahead of him here. James Harden, man, as much as I've, ragged on him this offseason, obviously I'm disappointed with his stance with the Sixers. Why he won't just go back and contend with this team, I don't know. We don't know how those conversations have gone between him and Morey, if there's even been conversations, right? Um, so that's one side of this, and I try to take that part out of it because Harden is a top 75 player of all time. He's a shooting guard turned into a point guard, but he honestly he shows signs that he could play both at the top level. 21 points per game, shot one of his best percentages from the 3-point line in his career at 38.5%. 6.1 rebounds, 10.7 assists per game. Also averaged over a steal per game, so he's active in the passing lanes. I think he catches a lot of unnecessary heat, disrespect for some of the things that have transpired in his career, and to the point where it has people just blasphemous underrating of James Harden in this day and age. And to that point, wanted to show him some respect by putting him in the top 5 here. The way you can look at the Sixers, for example, right? Look at the way that what he's turned Joel Embiid into, right? He's turned him into an MVP. He's made his life easy. He's put him in spots where he has automatic shots that are unstoppable. Like, a lot of that stuff with Embiid, and we'll see it this season if Harden ultimately does end up moving on. He made Embiid's life so much easier, especially in the regular season. And that goes for everybody. Tyrese Maxey, Tobias Harris, all of these guys on this team. And he's done that everywhere he goes. You saw it in the Houston Rockets with their small ball lineups and Clint Capella. He made Clint Capella look like an all-star center. Like, this is the type of stuff that James Harden can do with his playmaking ability. But then you saw the scoring ability in the postseason that he still has in his tank, right? We talked about some of these other guys and their outputs in the playoffs. Jamal Murray against the Lakers and De'Aaron Fox against the Warriors in the first round. Well, James Harden had 2 of the best performances in the playoffs last season against the Boston Celtics, who are a better team. So when I'm looking at this situation, yes, he's a little he's regressed a little bit when it comes to his first step, quickness, that type of thing, driving to the lane. But when it comes to his IQ and the playmaking ability, you could argue that it's progressed in reality, that it's gotten even better. And to that standpoint, that's why I have him at number 5 here, man.
I love that, and I respect you wholeheartedly for all of your Harden takes, to be honest. Like, it's crazy how emotional you get, and yet you can still stay so level-headed. And that's one thing, like, it grows all the time. Like, if there's anybody in Philly, like, I give props to, it's you, because you'll scream at the top of your lungs, you'll curse them out, and then yet you'll put things into perspective and you understand what the real facts are. And no, so you're always a go-to guy when it comes to Harden. I respect that, and
I appreciate that, man.
Very fair, for sure.
You always bring me back down to earth with Harden, so to be fair,
I appreciate I can help give some perspective there, but I think that's a fine spot for him. I have him at 4. I have Dame at 5.
Okay.
And yeah, I know the public disagrees with that, but here's the thing. Harden could be just strictly, when you think of the word point guard, you're right. He could be the number 1 point guard, but he could be the 5th best player of this group, or even less. It brings him down. But so there's different conversations to be had. But I look at this as point guard and overall player, obviously, here when I'm ranking these guys. And simply, Harden, of all these guys remaining, he makes everyone better around him a lot more than anybody besides maybe Steph. But I argue, I think Harden's made players throughout his entire career better than Steph has, like, wholeheartedly. If the players change around Steph Curry, if he doesn't have Clay, Kevin Durant, Draymond Green, like, he looks a lot different. And there's very few players in the history of the game that have made players as good as Harden. And that's the number 1 role when it comes to being a point guard. So it's intelligence and all that. It's funny because people loved and hated on Harden when he was being the best shooting guard, scoring 36 a game super efficiently, one of the greatest ISO players of all time. And then they ask him to change his game and demote him because he couldn't take down the greatest team of all time, and say you got to do less and you got to go to a point guard. Well, he proved he can be a great combo guard in Brooklyn. He did both with a stacked team and was on track there. And then they said, you can't, you need to average more assists or whatever. Then he showed he's the most intelligent point guard, continue to make everybody better around him. And the dude's just one of those guys that gets hated. Okay. And you can argue about the situations and how they ask for differently, but I will always be on the side of Brooklyn's the only real, you left Kyrie Irving and there was a lot of dysfunction there. So it's hard to just blame that one dude in that situation. Here in Philly, it should just be perfect, but it goes two ways here. It really does, and I won't state. I won't. We beat this every show. It's like I'm not going to state my full opinion until I know the contract talks, if this guy's in over his head or whatnot. But when it came down to Dame this year, and at this moment, Harden's always been better, more valuable than Dame, and just the fact that he makes players around him better, and Dame basically quitting on his team has to get demoted a little bit in that regards this year, and games played, and just Harden being a not great, but good to great playoff performer, and definitely way better than what Dame did this year. So there we go. That's why I have him switched around. Who is your number 4?
That is interesting, man. That is interesting. You make a great point to have Harden over Dame. Honestly, you make great points there. Number 4 for me is actually going to be SGA. So I went with my more credentialed point guards ahead of SGA. But to be fair to your point, I mean, you could argue Harden. SGA didn't see the playoffs. Harden did. But obviously SGA and OKC in the MVP conversation at some point in this season. Obviously, it died down a little bit towards the end of the season. But he was putting up incredible numbers, and that's ultimately why he comes in here. And it's also just the prototype of SGA and what he does, the type of guard that he is. He's a guy that gets to the free throw line a lot, and that's something that doesn't really die down, right? He averaged over 30 points last season, 51% from the field. Shot some of his best 3-point percentage, 34.5%. You'd like to see that go up a little bit, but he doesn't shoot a ton of them in reality. 4.8 rebounds per game, 5.5 assists per game. Like to see him evolve as a playmaker, but the team asks him to score to an extent, right? They have guys like Josh Giddey that can play make as well. So he kind of splits that responsibility. But then on the defensive end, he averages over 1.5 steals per game. He averages over 1 block per game. So he does it on that end as well. Really, SGA comes in at number 4 for me, man. He covers all the bases. And I think when you're looking at, say a Dame, which to be transparent, Dame's coming in at number 3 for me. So right ahead of SGA. Same thing, man. You can argue because Dame, the simple truth, the last, 2-3 seasons is that he just hasn't played a ton. He hasn't played at a top level for a ton of time, and he hasn't been truly consistent. Now, last year he averaged over 32 points per game, so you got to be fair to that, right? He can put the ball in the net. We know that. But just as far as contributing to winning and impact on a team, it is questionable. At the very least, it's questionable, right? But SGA, I had to give him his props here, put him in the top 5. I couldn't put him over the top 3 here. But I do think he's a guy that can get into that top 3 very soon. And especially with the trajectory that OKC is on, per se. I think SGA can get into that top 5 if they can make the playoffs, if he can continue to play at this level.
No, that's fair. I understand. And Dame, it's games played, not making the playoffs, and just shot selection, making others better around him. I know situation matters. That's why I think
you
my ranking
shot selection. That one's interesting, man.
No, I truly believe it's I truly believe it's declined because he just is trying to get his numbers and look good, and he's kind of getting sick of the situation. And I know working with things matter, the pieces he's playing with, but it's definitely regressed in that regards, and that's why his percentages has gone down. have gone down too at times,
Yeah.
especially the last 2 years. But games played for Dame have been 67, 29, 58 the last 3 years, and then 66 the year before that. So not great as well. But
When's the last
yeah,
time he made the playoffs
3 years
for
ago.
Portland? 3 years ago?
Yeah. 2021. Yeah. They were the 8th seed. They lost the Nuggets 2-4.
2-4.
So we
I think
got
I remember
2
that too.
games off a young blossoming Nuggets team. But my thing is, yeah, for SGA and Dame, so they're my tier 2. It's SGA at 3, Harden at 4, and then Dame at 5.
Okay.
And so I I think Dame and Harden are going to have a tough time staying in that tier 2. I think they can, but they could also go up. Who knows? Because I do think Dame's situation for sure got better if
Yeah. If he goes to Miami.
staying or going. Either way, there's no
Yeah.
excuses for Dame. Harden, who knows? We'll wait and see on that one. But SGA, I mean, he could get to 2, maybe even to 1, depending on the decline here. But for me, SGA, I mean, well-rounded. And I
Yeah.
do think we're to that point where SGA is just more available, more dominant than Dame, but also he's making dudes around him better. He's a very intelligent player. He plays
Yeah.
within the game, the flow. He doesn't force a whole lot, and I think
That's what I
it's
love
one of the
about his
most
game. Yeah.
natural and ethical players this game has seen in a while, and he's just progressed at a great rate. Two-way player,
Yeah.
arguably the best defender on this list, down to I don't know, Drew Holiday that compares
Drew
with him.
Holiday. Yeah.
I mean, like the best. Yeah, I mean,
There's guys
SGA
that are active
Harden.
defenders on this list, but they're not two-way per se players like
Right.
you would
Yeah, I
categorize
think
SGA.
SGA is a guy I can count on every night on defense. The only
Yeah.
other guy on this list I can say that really is Brunson and Drew. I mean,
Brunson and Drew Holiday.
everybody
Yeah.
else there's positive defenders like Harden and Fox
Yeah.
and I don't know, Halliburton. DeJounte Murray, but he's down at 14
DeJounte
for me.
Murray's a
So
good
it's
one.
like
Yeah.
it's not even in the conversation.
Man, SGA. I like what you said about his game, man. You called it ethical, and he just plays the game the right way, and I actually love that about his game. Yeah, shout out to SGA, bro. Number 2 for me. So we had for me at top 5 so far: Harden, SGA, Dame at number 3, and number 2 for me is going to be Luka Doncic. Now there's an argument that he can be number 1. Don't get me wrong; he fills the stat sheet similar to a SGA on the offensive end. Shoots the ball a little bit better from the outside, but he's just a prolific player. We know what he's capable of on a night-to-night basis. Obviously, the Mavericks, they did some weird stuff at the end of the season last year, basically not trying to make the playoffs. But the year before that, right, he takes the Mavericks, puts them on his back, and gets them to the Western Conference Finals, right? Takes down the Phoenix Suns, I believe, is who they beat, and he had the big series, or was it the
Yep.
Phoenix Suns that beat them? I'm getting
Uh,
confused. I'm backtracking, but I know they went to Western Conference Finals
yeah.
nonetheless, and ultimately ended up
Well, they
losing
beat the
there. But
Suns, and then they also beat the Clippers. But 2 years ago, the Suns
2
beat
years
them.
ago. Makes sense. And then he got his revenge. I remember
Right.
this now. Okay. So, yeah, Luka, he's had success in the playoffs, is ultimately what I'm trying to get at there. He does have experience there. You could argue that the teams around him haven't been the greatest, right? The greatest fits, whether that's from an off the court standpoint or on the court standpoint. But he just goes out there and fills the stat sheet. He's blown everybody away since he came over in the draft, right? And you know, I don't know what else to really say about it. He's just so prolific. Like he does everything. Like he can score the ball with the lights out. Like he rebounds well. He play makes well. The only question marks come on the defensive end of the ball, right? And that's where you can get into that conversation of, him versus an SGA in that young caliber of point guards there, because SGA is a better defender, obviously, but Luka's ceiling when he's hitting, when he's rolling, he's borderline unstoppable. And I think that's the term you can use for him. He's so smart. He has like that Paul Pierce-esque like slowness to his game and
Yeah.
patience, but still finds his spots, still has a quick step, still gets to the rim, and still finds his spots beyond the arc. This guy, on top of his skill set, he's also got this like persona that is very I think it could rub people the wrong way. It's likable to me. I like the way he acts and moves. I don't know if it's because he's foreign or whatever. It's because he's from Slovenia, but I really like him as a player, man. And he's definitely one of the best players in the NBA, not just the best point guard or one of the best point guards. He's one of the best players in the NBA. He comes in at number 2 for me.
Then our lists are very similar, 2 and 1 with Luka at 2, Steph at 1, of course.
Yeah.
But Luka, yeah, the only thing I'll add there is like, unlike Steph, Harden, and I don't know, like the guys we just mentioned on defense, like I don't think Luka can ever even be a positive defender like Steph and Harden. And that's the one thing. Like,
Downfall.
I hope he proves me wrong. Like Steph and Harden have both been, like Harden especially has been a very good defender at times, but he's also been bad at times. And Steph has always been a solid to positive defender. And so it helps get you in that ultimate tier of player. And that's why it might be harder for Luka to climb up, especially without teammates around him. And how many carry jobs can this guy do?
Right.
But at the end of the day, like, is he going to get a lot better outside of shooting? And I don't think the game, the only way he's improving, like shot selection, I don't know. It's going to be what it is. Maybe it can get a little better at times, but I don't know. I don't think it's terrible because he's a bad shot maker too.
Yeah, he is.
But
Yeah.
it's 3-point shooting. That just is the only area that really, because I'm not worried about defense. It's not going to happen, I don't think.
Yeah.
So 3-point shooting, how good can that get? And that's the levels he can get to. Other than that, I think he's going to be pretty solidified in the top 3 point guards for the rest of his career, for sure. And maybe be number 1 for a long time once Steph starts going backwards here, and could even start this year with. And Steph like Luka, no, unlike Luka, Steph, I mean, we've only seen downfall when Steph's teammates aren't very good. Steph's been a lot about situation. That's fine. He's a ceiling raiser versus a floor raiser. The difference is Luka's a floor raiser. There's very few floor raisers, and it doesn't mean one player is better than the other because one's a ceiling and a floor raiser. You need them both. They're both important, but it's how much ceiling versus floor goes into it. But yeah, that's the main difference I see. Steph Curry at 1. I do think he's going to be great again this year. But yeah, I'm more worried about his teammates than him necessarily. It's crazy, the conditioning, like even him and Luka's conditioning and body type both look great, and it looks like they're putting in off-season work.
Yeah.
It seems like the national games have never really impacted Luka either. And so that's fine. Let him keep playing.
Yeah, get him in better shape.
Yeah.
Do you think that's it with Luka on the defensive end of the ball though? Like, is it just him not being in shape, or is it like a lack of him wanting to defend?
Yeah.
Like,
I think it's desire and discipline, and I think he has to give so much on offense. I think the only way it gets better is putting a lot of great defenders around him. I mean, this team is getting more for sure. But even then he might even get worse.
Yeah. You
And I
just
think that's
never
just
know,
the type,
right?
I think that's more the mentality he has, which is what it is.
Because if you put better defenders around him, then that's good. When you get to the playoffs, especially, he's going to get picked on in mismatches, right? Like they're going to attack him
for sure.
So it is an interesting perspective. Steph comes in at number 1 for me as well. Um, I don't know. I thought about putting Luca over him. Like I thought about it, and then I went against it just because of
You
Steph's.
got to make the playoffs.
Yeah, you got to make the playoffs, and you got to compete at the highest level, which Steph has done in and year out. Right, even when his teammates have been out, he has been able to get his team to the play-in tournament at least. So he's done some things. Right, he's been in MVP conversations the last few years. But I think the biggest thing for me is how he's improved in other areas, not just the shooting, right? He's gotten bulkier. He's stronger now, right? In the last couple of years, he's able to go to the rack a little bit better and finish
Yep.
through contact. He's rebounding the ball better. He's playmaking better. He's getting his teammates involved a little bit better because he realizes he can't score 50 every night. So he uses his shooting ability to get other guys open. And I think that's the obviously the biggest part of his game is the shooting, and not just the shooting, but the attention that the shooting draws. And I talked about that with Trae Young, where you step across half court, you can't not guard him. Like you have to guard him. And that uses up energy from the other team. And that is a game plan within itself in designing and deciding how you're going to attack Steph Curry night in, night out. And of course, you have to do that for Luka. You have to do it for all of these guys. But I think with Steph Curry, it takes it to another level because you have no time to take a break. This guy is running off screens. He's running around the court like a chicken with his head cut off. And you're just chasing him around just for him to demoralize you with a fadeaway three-pointer in the corner in the tightest spot as he cashes it out, as he doesn't even look at it when he walks down the court. Like his game will demoralize you when he is on. And Steph, he's just a guy that is he's talked about in the conversations of all time players, right? And we talk about where does he rank in the top 20 of all time players at this point with Steph Curry, top 30, whatever you want to put him in.
Top 10, bro. Top 10.
Top 10? Okay, I didn't want to jump the gun. I know you're big on the I haven't put together my all-time rankings to really say where I have him. But yeah, top 10 is where I would lean just based off of what he's done and just the way he's changed the NBA. I know that doesn't really feed into this conversation with ranking point guards in the top 10 of right now. But he's one of those caterpillars, or one of those foundations of the NBA. I feel that we'll look back on in the future. But all the respect to Steph Curry, best point guard in the league still until he's not. And that's kind of the way I looked at it.
No, the last couple things I'll say on Steph Curry, I'm glad you mentioned finishing at the rim. It's crazy how he's gotten better there with age. He just had a career high last year of 76% at the rim, and it's gone up the last 3 years, which is insane. He was at 59% the year before. 76 is wild. And he went up in the 16-foot range too, mid-range. But yeah, it's impressive. He's gotten stronger. He's worked on things. And just guys at that level being able to get better and better is wild. Rebounding as well. Had a career high 6 rebounds last year. So he knows what the team needs and where they can attack. But last thing I'll say with Steph, when it comes to the point guard spot, is it's crazy. He's one of the least conventional point guards, but that's the role he played. That's why he's in this category. Like, if you label him a 2 guard, that's fine. Like, Harden's clearly been, you could arguably say, a point guard his whole career, but he was labeled a shooting guard a lot of times. Well, he played with Chris Paul, what have you. And in Houston, the early years, whether it was Pat Beverly or whoever was next to him. So Harden's now a solidified point guard, but all time wise, I'm going to be looking at Harden. I'm going to be labeling him a combo. He'll be in the 2 guard because that's where he spent the majority of his career, depending on how long his career goes and how high he finishes at the point guard spot. But he's proven to be all time in both. But Steph, he plays like a shooting guard. Yes, I get that. But he's the one bringing the ball up. He's the point guard. That's the label we've given him. That's why he's in this category. Exactly. So semantics, say whatever you want.
Yeah, forget about
Steph Curry, man. He's special. I think he's going to be here another year or two.
I love that you pointed that out before we end the show here. Just about, he's not your prototypical point guard. He's not your floor general point guard per esque. But he is a guy that brings up the ball. And when you look at the Golden State Warriors, who else is the point guard on the team? Draymond
Right.
Green. Like, you know what I mean? Like, who is the
Yep.
on those other teams, those other guys you mentioned, Harden, right? There's other point guards involved in the situation. This is not that. There's Klay Thompson, and then you got Wings and Draymond Green.
Well,
So
Draymond and Jokic are both. You consider them? They play like point guards.
they're
They
floor
often play like
generals for
point.
sure. Yeah.
But that's not the position they are. Let's keep it clean if we want to do rankings and
Yeah.
have fun like that in regards. But
We
yeah,
could do
we get it.
playmakers, right? We
Yeah,
could do
right.
playmakers and then include Jokic and
Yep.
Draymond and include those guys in the top 10. But for positional rankings, this is how we got to keep it. Got to keep it clean, as you said. But man, I'm sorry for taking us over the cutoff time here, brother. No, you got to get to work. I am going to let you get out of here. That is going to be it for this episode of Scotty Talks NBA, guys. Please enjoy. Hit the subscribe button. Hit the like button on the video to help us grow. And of course, share it out to your friends and family. Let us know what your top 10 point guards in the NBA right now are. We will be back next week to discuss top 10 shooting guards, which should be fun. But that is going to be it for this episode of Scotty Talks NBA, guys. Have a great rest of your Tuesday there. Peace.